Yeah, there it is. That sentence. It feels like a total contradiction, doesn't it? One part of it gives you exactly what you want to hear, I love you, but the other part just slams the door in your face. It's a paradox that leaves you feeling completely lost and, honestly, a little betrayed.
And our first instinct, almost always, is to think that's a lie. The popular wisdom says this is just a coward's way of breaking up, right? A dishonest excuse to try and soften the blow. But is that really the whole story?
Let's just pause for a second and explore a much more challenging idea. What if, in some cases, that phrase isn't a lie at all? What if saying, I love you, but we can't be together is actually the hardest and maybe even the truest act of love there is? Let's dig into that. So, why is this statement so incredibly hard for us to believe? Well, it really comes down to a fundamental contradiction in how we're pretty much all taught to think about love and commitment. We tend to see love as this very black or white thing. It's like a switch. It's either on or it's off. You're either all in, you're ready to fight tooth and nail for the relationship, or you're out, and you don't really love them. There's just no room for a third option, no gray area where you can love someone with all your heart, but also know, deep down, that you just can't be with. And this all or nothing thinking, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It's actually deeply rooted in this really powerful cultural idea that has been shaping our expectations about relationships for centuries. And that idea is called romanticism. It's the philosophy that basically tells us that pure, true emotion is the only thing that matters. All those practical things like money or distance or family issues, according to romanticism, that's all just background noise. They're minor details that true love should just be able to steamroll right over. I mean, listen to this quote from D.H. Lawrence. It just perfectly captures this absolute all-in point of view. It's the romantic ideal cranked up to 11. It suggests that love shouldn't just conquer misery, but that it must. A willingness to suffer becomes the ultimate proof of how sincere your love is. And we're not just talking about romantic gestures like sleeping on a park bench. This ideal gets applied to huge real-life challenges. Things like having no money, or living on different continents, or dealing with mental illness, or having completely different long-term goals in life. Romanticism doesn't see these as potential deal breakers. Nope. It frames them as tests, as hurdles you have to clear to prove your love is pure. But there is another way of looking at all of this. A completely different philosophy that doesn't just throw emotion out the window, but instead puts it into a much bigger, much more realistic context. This other way of thinking argues for balance. It absolutely respects our feelings, that deep, powerful affection, but it gives equal weight to the real, practical, often messy challenges of actually building a life with another person. It understands that love, no matter how powerful it is, doesn't just exist in a bubble. So here's where these two ideas clash, and you can really see the difference. On one side, romanticism says your feelings will conquer everything. But on the other, practicality says, hang on, feelings can't just wish away real-world misery. Romanticism sees hurdles as a test of your love, while practicality sees them for what they often are, real sources of pain and suffering. And this leads to the most important difference of all. The goal shifts from just being together, no matter the cost, to making sure that both people are actually okay, that they can thrive, even if that means being apart. So this huge clash of ideas, it kind of forces us to take a step back and ask a much deeper question. What do we even mean when we say those three little words, I love you? And maybe this requires a new definition of love, one that isn't about possession or about our own selfish need to be with someone. Maybe at its core, love is really about wanting what is genuinely best for the other person. It's a focus on their care, their growth, and their well-being above all else. And if we accept that definition, well, that leads to a really hard question. If staying with you means dragging your partner through one avoidable misery after another, constant financial stress, family drama, endless anxiety, can you really, honestly call that a loving thing to do? Which forces us to ask ourselves one final critical question. You have to look in the mirror and ask, am I fighting for this relationship for their sake, for their happiness, for their fulfillment, or am I fighting for it for my own satisfaction, just to avoid the pain of being alone, even if it's going to hurt them in the long run? That's a really tough distinction to make, but it's a vital one. So all of this brings us to our final and maybe most provocative thought. What if we've reframed the act of leaving not as a failure of love, but as its greatest potential sacrifice? Now, Let's be really clear. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for being dishonest. Of course, some people use this phrase as a cheap and easy way out, but we also have to make room for a much harder truth, that some true lovers, after a lot of painful thought, make the ultimate sacrifice. They step away because they honestly believe it's the right thing to do for the person they love.
And look, none of this is meant to take away from the incredible honor and fighting for a relationship. Giving it your all, trying your absolute best to overcome the odds, that is a beautiful, noble, and amazing thing, and it should always be celebrated.
But maybe, just maybe, there is an even greater act of love. To truly adore another person, to recognize that your presence in their life, for whatever reason, is going to cause more pain than joy. And then to make the absolutely heartbreaking decision to leave them well alone so they can find the peace and the happiness that they truly deserve. It's a painful thought for sure, but maybe, just maybe, it's also a profoundly loving one.